So, hello. Welcome to another edition of Verses with Leader, and this time we are featuring the totally punching higher than I ever thought it could, under appreciated maybe. It's the Elektron Model Cycles, and honestly, this thing, I mean, it looks like a cheap little plastic toy. It is an Electron box, though, and let me tell you, the looks on this thing are deceiving because this thing is fantastic. I absolutely love this little box. If you may have read the description in the video, I'll just kind of go over shortly of my background with it, and that was I've been an Elektron user for about a decade now, and I love their gear. It's fundamentally changed the way that I make music, and this guy came out. I remember sitting in a Walmart parking lot. It was the only place to shop in northern Michigan, and I saw, of course, there was lots of rumors something's coming out, and this came out, and I was like, what the heck is this? Some cheap little plastic. I can't believe Elektron would, we're waiting for some really cool new box to come out, and this thing came out, and I was so disappointed. And I told myself, well, I will never buy that thing. It's useless. It's a monophonic 6-track, FM, very limited. It looks very limited. All these parameters are not like what you would find normally on an FM machine. It's geared in that way of Elektron style of machine synthesis, which I'll talk about here in a moment. But anyways, I looked at it and I wrote it off. I was like, there's no way this thing's a joke. Okay, it's a little FM drum machine, whatever. I'm sure a piece of software would be just as good. So I didn't buy it, of course. About a year, I think, went by, maybe a little more, year and a half. And I had to go on this trip, and the trip was going to be a big trip. It was going to be a long, a lot of moving around. I wanted to bring something with me, and I was just so in love with Elektron that I was just using those boxes every day. But I didn't want to take that. I didn't want to bring my really nice Elektron boxes because who knows? Things are crazy. They're heavier. They could get damaged. I did have a way to portable power them, which was like this really nice battery pack, but it was still just too much. So I said, you know what, I'm going to buy this thing, and maybe I'll just poke around with it a little bit, and I'll just whatever, to just be something to kind of occupy my free time. Well, let me tell you, this thing changed. This thing changed my life. As ridiculous as it sounds, but, I've been playing music for a long time, and I've been a perfectionist for way too long when it comes to music. And I've basically never really released anything that I was fully into as well as that I thought was properly mixed, all that stuff. So I never really had a proper release of music. I just kind of already did my thing and just whatever. Anyway, I wrote about, I think it was 10 songs on this thing within a couple of weeks that I was very proud of, and I was blown away how much I could squeeze out of this thing. I became obsessed. I learned how to do every little trick, or most of them. There's still a few tricks that I don't use enough, or maybe I don't even know. We're going to go over all the things that I know, and we're going to create some sounds with it. But let me just say, I can't tell you how wrong I was about this little box. It is a powerhouse of a machine. It is super light. I run it off a cheap little battery power thing with a cheap little case. I can throw it in my backpack. I can take it hiking. I can take it on trips. And, obviously it's not super cheap. I got it when it was much cheaper. I think I only paid like $250, maybe even less, because I had some some bonus points with some company. They go for about $400 now, I think, which is a bummer. You can get them used for probably in the $200 range. It does have a sister synth called the Model Samples that does, from my understanding, it's basically the same machine with the exception that it plays samples instead of synths. So obviously you're going to have different parameters and such, but in terms of the box, it's the same, slightly different color. But, same button layouts, same sequencer, same kind of, managing the menu to most degrees. I haven't actually used one of those, so I'm kind of basing this off my knowledge of just reading the manual and watching some videos. But anyways, they have the two. They didn't do a lot of updates over the life of this machine, unfortunately, which is kind of not really Elektron style. They usually do, but maybe this thing was just, kind of reached its limit of CPU power or what have you. It does have a reverb and a delay send. It's got some unique features to the sequencer. I really wish some of those would port over to the rest. For example, locking, I think you can do that now in the machine ones, but the new digis, but locking the fill, so you can basically track page and it locks the fill to just keep playing until you turn it off. You can also do, it does have the same thing that the digis do, which is the track all. So if I hold this and I play with one of these parameters, it affects all 6 of the tracks at the same time, which is very fun. It also has okay, we'll go through all this stuff, but I'll just mention this last one. I can't believe this isn't on the other boxes because this is genius. I don't know why it's not there, but you can apply, as they call it, the quantization, meaning you can set a quantization value, apply it, and then it lines all the trigs up where you expect them to be, and then it zeroes out the quantization. So that may sound pointless to some degree, but I'll show you if we have time. If not, I'll maybe talk about it in a different video. But that is a huge deal when it comes to being fast in your workflow and using sound locks, because you may, create something you really like and you want to quantize and get it just right, but then say you have 8 and 10 trigs filled and you want to do something on 9 that you push over to 10. Yeah, anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself because that doesn't probably make a lot of sense yet to anybody, to most people. So, Elektron Model Cycles. It is a 6-track monophonic synth, meaning you have 6 individual tracks. Each one of those can play one note at a time. Now, there is sort of an exception here, but we'll talk about that in a second, because next I'm going to talk about the machines. We have machines, and each one of these tracks can use any of those machines, meaning you can play the entire thing with all kick drums if you wanted. You could do the whole thing with the chord machine, which is what I'm going to talk about here in a moment here, or you can just, do whatever you want. But I end up using I think I basically use 4 machines on average, maybe 5. Yeah, because I use the tone machine for both the lead and the drum, the bass, and then the chord machine over here, and then I do my kick, my snare, and my hats. Now, that's just my starting template. Obviously, that we can change that all up, and once we get into the idea of merging tracks, I actually did a video on this, my 6 tips for the modal cycles. If you use the modal cycles, I think there's a lot of information there that could help you, because there are all the things that I've learned over the years of using this. One of those things being you can basically merge tracks, sort of, by using the sound locks and saving presets, which we'll talk about that as well. So back to the machines. We have the kick machine, we have the snare machine, we have the metal machine, which is kind of more like, hi-hats, percussion stuff. You can also squeeze a little bit of some crashes and stuff out of there. Percussion, which is just more of like kind of toms and belly sounds, and also bell sounds, and we'll go through all this stuff, but it's percussion. Then the tone, and this is just sort of like a traditional synthesizer sound. The parameters are not the same you're going to find for any of these. It's a machine based, and what that means is they have a particular set of parameters that they give you to control the sound. They, in some of the machines, for example, like the Analog Rhythm, which is another great Elektron machine, they're designed so they make you achieve the sounds you're looking for quicker. Some people find them limiting. I kind of did in the beginning, but I also have the Analog 4, which is a straight up subtractive synthesizer with all the things you would expect plus more inside of a synth. So I don't know. They all I think it's a cool ecosystem. I like the idea of being able to have an Elektron synth that is a true synth. I like having one that's a drum machine. I love having the ones that are samplers, like the Digitac, the Octatrack. Oh my God, that thing's amazing. And of course, now the new Toneverk. Anyway, this is their FM. They also have the Digitone, which is their kind of flagship FM synth, which is a really fantastic, absolutely get under the hood and do everything you can imagine with FM. This is not that. This is a simpler machine that has only a handful of parameters. These parameters do cross over a pretty wide palette of sound alteration, but it is, to some degree limited. So before we jump in and start making some sounds, what I think we'll do is we'll pick a machine for each pad and we'll go through and make some sounds. We're going to save those sounds. That way we can load them back as sound locks through the preset menu. But what I also want to do is just kind of tell you how I approach the modal cycles. My big thing with this, I am obsessed with manuals, so I do read the manuals of every synth I've ever owned multiple times. I love them. And I usually study those things so that I can really dive my way into the synth and really understand what every little twist, every tiny thing of something that's going on, I want to know. Doesn't mean I'll remember it necessarily and use it to make the sound, but I just want to know it initially. I did that with the modal cycles, but honestly, I promptly forgot all that stuff because I just didn't care. I actually fell in love with this synth because I became used to just knowing what these knobs do per machine and just using my ear and trying to find exactly what I was looking for with my ear. And because of that, I have had such a blast with this machine. It is just fun. But I will say the biggest thing that I've realized with this machine more than any other for me is that I don't necessarily get to control where the song goes, meaning I start with an idea and I start letting the machine kind of tell me where to go in terms of like when I start tweaking things and hearing things that I like. If I go, oh, I want to make this kind of song and try to do that on here, which I've tried, it's a struggle. It's a bit of a struggle. I'm sitting there trying to get a sound that's in my head to come out of this machine. And maybe if I had studied it more and maybe all, other things, I could have do that. But I realized I have, a ton of other synths that I can do that with. This is just a fun time happy box for me. So that said, let's make some sounds. I will say a few things that I kind of consider pros and cons as we go along. But for the most part, we're just going to make some sounds and maybe generate a quick little pattern and kind of get a little funky with it and play with the control all, or I guess, control all. That's what they call it here. And we'll just have some fun. So without further ado, we're going to do a kick. So I will say, like I mentioned before, if I'm going for a specific sound, it's going to be tough. Because I don't know, it just doesn't work that way for me. So with the kick, for example, I'm not going to find that dusty kind of kick that I really, really enjoy, that I can do with an FM machine. In fact, I think the Digitone is one of my favorite machines to make drums and kicks, especially with. But you kind of have to take what you get with this guy. And once you get to that point, you kind of accept it and realize this has a very specific sound. I don't know, man. I fell in love with it. And I feel like if somebody played me something that was made with the Model Cycles at this point in time, I would recognize it because I know its fundamental tone. So anyway, let's get on with the kick. One complaint real quick, or one con I will say, that these pads suck. They really suck. They're really hard to play. You gotta bang them to get that full level, which is why I end up playing. Oh, I had the delay on there. That was weird. Let's clear that. I end up using these little guys here, which are actually fantastic, ironically. I play lots of key sounds on here. I'll do some leads. I'll show you how I do that too. And honestly, they're extremely playable. So it's kind of funny that the sequencer buttons are so fantastic, but the buttons you're supposed to use to actually play the sounds just at the notes you set here, they suck. And what also kind of sucks about them is when you go to like mute channels, if you soft push, you see, still nothing. There it goes. Like you gotta give it some oomph, which is not usually a big problem, unless you say trying to do 4 at once or more. If you can try to get 5, and you can see I missed 3 and 5. So not great. I've seen some people do some modifications that, maybe I'd consider one day. I don't know, but not everything's perfect. I take it for what it is. So anyway, these guys down here, so you can hear that's a really low. See if I can turn this up a little bit. See how we're getting? Yeah, we're getting a pretty low sound here. So, okay, here's our palette of control here. Honestly, you don't get that much because, one, this is a reverb control. This is delay. That's delay time and a reverb size. You do get secondary functions on just a couple of these, specifically these here. And then you also get, let's see, for sound design, you get pitch, decay. Those are going to be the same across all. Color generally messes, it's different for every machine. So these 4 here are essentially going to change per machine what they do. So we have color, we have shape, we have sweep, we have contour. And then basically after that, you don't get any other sound design options. You get a delay send, you get a reverb send, you get your LFO speed control, you get volume. They call it volume plus distortion because once you get past a certain level, it really just starts crackling. And that is, I'll say, some people like it. I try to avoid it. Sometimes I like it, but you can really push the levels in this thing easily, I find. And so you end up distorting, and that's a cool sound if that's what you want, but sometimes I want a clean track and I have to make sure to bring everything back down. So can be a little challenge. So we also have swing, which controls obviously the sequencer swing. If you hold down function and get the secondary, it is nudge, which is the concept of moving things slightly inside the sequencer. Each one of these steps represents a trig on the sequencer. You do have 4 pages. If you keep it at the scale that it's at right now, you're getting 64 steps, and you get that. So it's essentially 4 bars if you think about it. So each bar represents 16 steps. And then you basically break that down by adjusting the scale if you want to, but we're going to keep that as a normal 64 steps. And each one of these can be perfectly on the grid. Did I already have a song here? Oh, yeah, I forgot to switch. Let's go to a new. There we go. Nope. That song you heard earlier was a new song I'm actually going to put out hopefully either Thursday or Friday. And it was something I just wrote a few days ago on the cycles. Again, I put this thing down sometimes and I don't use it for like a couple months sometimes. And I pick it back up and I feel a little like, oh God, how does everything work? But within like 10 minutes, it's all back. And I love that. I spent a lot of time with this guy, but it's just very intuitive to me. And I just think it's such a fantastic little box. Okay, so let's make sure we're now in a new, oops, there we go. We are in a new project, totally clean. We're using the standard sound, so let's hear what they sound like. Okay. I don't know if I'm sorry, I feel like I stopped in between all the different machines here because I wanted to mention the chord machine. I think I stopped at the tone. The chord machine is the one sort of, so I mentioned before these are all monophonic tracks, and it is still a monophonic track, but with the chord machine, you do get to use multiple notes. You can't play them individually. You can't do a lot in terms of like, well, I mean, that's kind of the main thing. You can't play them individually. You cannot play a chord choosing the notes that you want to play. By like, essentially the keyboard, which is, I'll refer to this as the keyboard because that's how I play, but is also the sequencer. But when we're playing a song like this or playing a sound, it acts like a keyboard. So you can hear, I can't play more than one trig. That trig can play multiple notes, but it's contained within that chord voice. And so, chord voicing, I should say. You can alter that. Look at me. Can you see this? Oh, I'm sorry. I got to go back. There we go. And I bet you somebody probably said, nope, I guess not. And the screen here, you can see, we actually have all these chord shapes. So you do get some unison, which kind of is not, it's very nice because it's kind of like the tone machine, but you get unison and you can adjust the unison with the color knob here. So you can get those real wide, even horrible sounds here. Look, let's go to unison 4. I say horrible, but I mean, I love those sounds. It's just, they sound horrible, but I love them just the same. But so that's unison, but then now you get all the different chords. You get some crazy chords in here too, which I love jazz music, but I can't imagine trying to write jazz on here. So I'm honestly not going much beyond, I think the suspended chords are probably the wildest chords I'm going to use, besides like a dominant 7 or something like that. So real quick, we go through, we've got major, minor, sus2, sus4, minor 7, major 7, minor, so that's probably a minor third with a major 7, yeah it is, and just keeps going, major add 9, and a minor 6, major flat 5s, minor flat 5s, and then you got, look at these, like, major, oh come on, come back, major 6, add 4, no 5. So it's like a major 6 suspended in a way. Major 9, no 5. It's so wacky. And you get a 5ths and 4ths at the end, but like tons of chords in here. I think it's got to be in the range of like 30, maybe more. So that is very cool. And you can do some really fun stuff with that. I will say, I've got a decent amount of training in music theory, but I still kind of struggle with writing this way. It's not as intuitive. It's honestly the one thing about the cycles that I can struggle with. I still get good results, but I feel like I have to put way more time than I probably should. probably a lacking on my end. You know, even though I know a fair amount of music theory, it's still like, you know, I think more music theory from a piano perspective versus just writing in my head. And if I was better at that, maybe I wouldn't struggle as much. Like I said, I still yield some, I mean, for me, great results. So I'm really happy with it. But I kind of wish there was a better way. The other thing you can do too is you can also change what's called an inversion. So not to get too in the weeds on music theory, but think of an inversion. If you have a chord's made up of, say, 3 notes. It's usually the minimum. So you have a 1, a 3, and a 5. You're in that 3 defines, well, that's not important. You have a 1, a 3, and a 5. So if you look at a keyboard, you're playing like a C, an E, and a G. If you got those 3 notes, but say you want to stack them different. Say you want to stack them so that you actually have the G, which is the 5th of the C chord. You want to stack that underneath. So it's basically going to start with the G, but then it's going to go C and E. That's called an inversion. And when you have an inversion, you can define it by which note you are actually putting at the bottom and which order and all that kind of stuff. You can do that with this guy. So if you see this color button, you'll start seeing right now. Let's see, is it going to change? Second inversion, third inversion, and most likely it depends on how many notes you have in the chord. It should. But think, the general concept is a regular chord, just a chord. The first inversion is taking the very next note after your root, which in this case we're talking about C. So the next note in that chord is an E, which is the 3rd. You're going to move that below. So you're going to take it an octave down. So you're going to play E first, then your C and your G. That would be a first inversion because you move the first note after the root to the bottom. If you did a second inversion, you would be grabbing the G and putting that to the bottom. So if you had a third inversion, you'd be grabbing whatever's past that, a 6th, a 7th, whatever, a 9th maybe, I guess, sort of, yeah. Anyway, it's been a little while since I've concerned myself too much with that, but very capable. So back to the machines, to the sounds. Geez, maybe I need to wrap this up. Yeah, we're in 20 minutes and I've been just talking about the machines. So I'm going to start doing a little better job of getting that done faster because I'm sure most people are coming here to not listen to me. My Kermit the Frog voice, as somebody told me recently. Okay, so let's try. I'm going to add some decay on here just so we can really hear it. Let's mess with the sweep parameter. So sweep really is a sweep parameter. If you are ever making kicks from scratch, an important factor is to get the sweep, which is a pitch sweep. And the idea is you're taking that pitch, generally of like a sine wave or something, is kind of traditional for an electronic drum kick. But you're going to basically take that sweep of that pitch and you're going to go from high and low. And it's supposed to kind of mimic the idea of hitting a drum with the kick, the batter. When you hit that drum, the initial hit is so hard that it actually vibrates at a high frequency. And then as it slows down, you get into the deeper frequencies. We mostly hear the deeper, but that first transient, that first smack is a high pitch, and that's what the sweep is trying to mimic. So if we crank it all the way up, you can hear that's called a transient, that beginning, that snap. If we take it down, it goes away, and all we really get is the body, that lower pitch. I generally kind of put it in the middle. I don't usually have the decay that long. Mostly the music I make, if I have a long decay on a kick, it's going to just rumble and mud up the song. So I basically try to get rid of that. But on the other hand, if you're making a song that may not even have a bass drum, or a bass synth or sound, a nice long decayed kick drum can fit really well. Okay, let's go there. And then something else I like to do. We're going to go to function. We're going to go to the keyboard menu, or the track menu, sorry. And we're going to bring down, actually we're going to go to the keyboard and we're going to bring that down just a few. Let's go down 7. 7 steps equals a fifth. I know that's kind of weird to think about that. Trying to find, you can hear. God, that pad. There it is. I like to come a little lower than what the pad traditionally starts off with. You can adjust what the pad does, but honestly, I don't use it because I think it's not great. So much better control out of this. These are velocity sensitive though, so I will say there is some use for them if you're up for it. I tend to just play it in with this and then I go later and program back. So let's get a 4 on the floor going on this guy. 1, 5, 9, 13. Gonna make sure we're just in the 16 steps. We're using just one page of the sequencer. So there's my problem already, is I programmed these in, and by doing so, I actually used the track button menu setting, so I have it C5. But I can adjust that. I find, honestly, F or E, about a 4th or 5th down, is usually, sorry, that'd be a 4th or a 5th or a 6th down, is usually where I end up hovering. I don't really like the C. I think it's too high. Take the decay out. There are a few more parameters. I should have mentioned this, and I apologize. I did mention the LFO in terms of the speed. That, of course, is a sound design tool. So I said you just have these ones up here, but that was completely wrong because you also have a LFO. I'm not going to use that just yet, but what I really wanted to talk about was this punch. So you can hear how much of that sound that just changed, how much of that changed the sound. The only thing I don't like about the punch is you don't really have any control over it. It just kind of comes in, and I feel like they say it's kind of like a compression and like a little bit of dirt and all that stuff. It sounds great on snares, even on hi-hats and some other things, but I never use it on the kick. It kind of robs the low end. Turns it more into like a floppy, low, medium tom. So yeah, it's a very cool feature for other things, but I wanted to show it off just in case. Hey, maybe you like that sound, and more power to you. I struggle to use that. I've tried, but I feel like it's just too high. So we're going to leave the LFO for now because honestly, the kick, you don't get a whole lot to do here. Let's see what we can... So that has to do with the volume of the sweep oscillator, or whatever we're using over here. You can hear. Not sure if it's a mix between the body and, you know, whatever they're going to call the higher oscillator, because you're generally going to use 2 oscillators, the body and then the one that's doing the real fast pitch sweep. So you can make it very dry, which is kind of nice. I'm going to give it a little bit. I think that's good right there. All right, let's mess with the shape. That sounds like kind of a, it just kind of sounds like an FM. Like maybe coming in with a little bit of extra, another sine wave is modulating that. I don't know if you guys remember this, and I think they still exist, but there's these balloons that they're big, and you can tie them to your hand and do kind of like a yo-yo type of thing, and that's what that sounds like to me. That's great. So to me, using the kick machine to make toms is totally great. To make kicks, it's okay. You can get something, but you don't get a whole ton of control. Not as much as I like, but it still works. I'm pretty happy with that. We're going to go with that. Okay. Function, hold that down. We're going to mute it just because I'm going to use that sequencer again and I don't want to hear the kick for a little while. Let's go and change our... It's already there. We're going to use the snare machine. You can see, yeah, that's great. That looks great on the screen, the little tiny screen there. Okay, so I'm just going to keep it simple. Let's do a 5 and 13. Snares, in my opinion, the template to start off with it's weak. It's not great, but that's okay. Who wants if you turn this on and it was the perfect kick right when you started, then that would kind of suck. You would have no fun. Let's mess around a bit. A lot of similarities between the snare and the kick drum in terms of what these controls do. So let's find a decent amount of decay, not too much more. 43 sounds good. Color. Let's hear where it sounds cranked up. It sounds like it's basically tuning that second oscillator. We'll keep it there for now. Shape all the way up, so let's turn it all the way down. Okay. So shape is clearly adjusting how much of the noise we have in there versus the body. So you can hear that's just, again, another great percussion engine. And I actually do like the snare machine on this guy. I actually have, it's very unique, in my opinion, to the Model Cycles, but I've fallen in love with the snares because I used them so much, and I feel like you can really create some cool stuff with it. Right there. Sweep. You can really hear it's getting way up in that high pitch and slowly sweeping down. Not much for me. 25 should do. Contour is interesting. I feel like it operates the opposite way in the tone machine. But you can hear it's cutting off. It's basically, it's sort of like a decay in a way, but it also has a little bit of filtering to it. It's like it opens the filter, but it cuts off the length. Interesting. I should read up and really get an idea of what it's doing, but again, you know, I'm not gonna because I love just using my ear with this machine. To me, it's like that's what makes it fun for me. Is it keeps it surprising, maybe. I don't know. It just really makes me have to use the ears, which, you know, if you're not using ears when you make music, then I don't know what the heck you're doing. It's like covering your eyes when you're painting. It makes no sense to me. Let's not put any reverb in there yet, but let's engage this punch and hear what we get. Get a nice little thwack on that transient, and I do like that. No? Yes. Yes. Okay. So, I'm going to do something real quick that I often like to do with my snares, particularly on Elektron machines. Thankfully, they have a pretty robust LFO on here, and I'm going to use the LFO to kind of give us a little bit more of a chop on that snare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this sawtooth waveform. I'm going to bring it down to low just because we really just want it to run one solid time. If we just do one there, I can adjust the LFO speed. We might need to increase a little bit, but I think that's going to be good. Here's the kind of odd thing. So I am going to go ahead and set this to volume. Another awesome feature. Look at that. So as I'm selecting, it's highlighting which one. So instead of having to stare at this little tiny screen, I can whoop right to it. Awesome. Okay. Click there to go back. Now the depth. So here's the point. I'm just going to go ahead and put a little bit on here. And I'm going to actually bring it up quite a bit. You can hear how it's being kind of unpredictable. You might think I have a random LFO here, but I don't. What I have is an LFO that is not reset per trig. Click that. Now I can hear it's consistent every time. That's good for now, but believe it or not, I don't want consistency because I like my drums to have a little bit of humanity to them, if you will. But we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm going to turn this volume actually down. You can hear this thing is still going. Well, why is that? Because I have the LFO. It says distortion, but it is on the volume and distortion. So if I turn this down, then it gets quiet. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to bring it back up. Maybe let's go like 57. Okay. Let's hear what the kick just sounds with it. Okay, we can turn this down a little bit too, which I'll just do with the track. Volume. You do get two locations to adjust the volume, which is really great, and that actually comes in super handy when you are doing the locks. Here, I'm going to move this over a little bit. The sound locks, because then you can actually get separate control between the two sounds that are actually occurring on the same track. But I don't know if we'll have time for that, but again, that 6 tips I put out there for the modal cycles, we'll go over that in depth. That is probably, if I had to give you one thing that you learned from this, that if you're trying to learn something new about the modal cycles, if I exposed you to the concept of sound locks and how to use them to really expand the palette of this machine and the quote-unquote limitations, if you will, the 6 tracks, that would be it. It would be it. That is like the fundamental thing. Once I had that in my pocket, this thing became a full-on groove box to me, because I could go well beyond just the 6 simple sounds. I could go as much as I wanted within reason. I could do like 100 sounds on one pattern if I felt so inclined. But regardless, please learn that if you are into this machine, because it will reward you so much. So back to that snare. Let's get rid of that kick again. Oops, I brought it back in. Let's see here. Oh, yes, we're doing the LFO, so I'm going to increase the LFO speed. Come back here, and we're going to go to... There we go. Maybe a little bit lower. Cool. It's very subtle, but it gives it a little bit more of a pop to me. I'm actually going to slow that down just a little bit more. Maybe bring out the decay a little bit. But it makes it all a little bit tighter, and I really love that with a good snare. Not all the time, but it's a good place to start, because then you can decide to loosen it up. But honestly, if you got something cooking that's good, I love a tight snare. A big open snare can really work at times, but honestly, it can really just wear on my ears, that much noise constantly, so I like a tight snare. All right. Let's turn the snare off. Now we're on to the hi-hats. Now I will admit that the hi-hats, it's a bit of a struggle to get what I would consider good sounding hi-hats. It's possible, but for me, again, this is just opinion and taste. The range of sounds that I can really define as what I would consider a good hi-hat is fairly small. I feel like 80% of the sounds that I would make by using all the different parameters on here would not be a good hi-hat. What is this hair doing? Not a good hi-hat sound. But the 20% that I can make off of here, I really do enjoy. So, take what you can with that. All right, let's go ahead and just do an 8 bar here, an 8 step. All right, so that's the standard sound. It's honestly one of the better sounds, because once you start messing around with, say, the color, it gets very metallic. And to be fair, I'm approaching this synth as a full-on, not genre-limited machine. If you are interested, I would say I think at least 15, maybe even 20 modal cycle songs on my page that I do full performances of, and they range from like sort of reggae, from kind of, I don't even know what you would call some of them, but just like down-tempo electronica, all sorts of stuff. But what I'm not doing is I'm not writing noisy, kind of crazy stuff. Not that I don't like that, and not that I don't want to write that. It's just I've never have. This machine has been more of like just an idea machine. And like I mentioned before, I start writing the song and it kind of takes its own way, and kind of I let it lead me. So I've never said, okay, I'm going to make this kind of sound and been successful, or this kind of song and been successful. So I do want to actually do some more kind of noisy glitch stuff with this, but I keep falling down that rabbit hole of making like a really kind of, I don't know. You'll just check out the songs and please let me know what you think. But yeah, I struggle to kind of get away from that. So with that said, I'm trying, maybe subconsciously, maybe consciously, to make them sound like real drums as close as I can get. And yeah, that can be difficult with an FM machine, that is, especially one that's very limited. So that actually doesn't sound that bad to me. So far, all I've really done is mess with the shape a little bit. Let's try the color. We're at 16. Oh, maybe it was just the color I messed with, and I think I went back to the default. Come on. There we go. Let's hear what shape does. sort of like a tone. It's cleaning up that noise. Yeah, it seems like it's controlling a little bit of the pitch or the tone of the noise and also the length. That's good. Let's hear what sweep does. Almost nothing. And it could be whatever parameter we have set up here that is like, you know, low. So if we do color, it's at 16. So here, let's crank this up to 104 unless we have it 16 here. I mean, I don't hear much of anything. So that's interesting. I feel like I didn't realize that now until I had to actually talk while I'm using it. Contour's not doing much either, but we also have the decay, and I feel like the shape is doing, between the decay and the shape, we're kind of achieving what the contour would do with these particular settings. If I opened it up, maybe it'd be a little different. Obviously, I'm not going to mess with the delay yet or the reverb, but let's come over to the LFO speed. So, I did mention there's an LFO, but I should also point out that there is only one LFO. So you need to be very, very deliberate with your choice. There is another really nice feature which is called the velocity depth or velocity sensitivity. I'm sorry, velocity modulation technically, and we will talk about that shortly. But in most ways, you essentially just get this one LFO to create some, what I would consider like some variation or maybe some, again, to use it again, humanity to the sound. And that's exactly what I'm going to do this time. I'm going to come over. I'm going to leave it on the triangle. I think that's a pretty good all-around wave there. I'm going to do, let's stick with what it's doing right now. It's doing eighth notes, and if you do 8 here, that's basically saying it's going to trig 8 times over a 16 bar, and we're basically on that right there. So the idea right there is it's kind of moving as at the same speed, if you will, as this guy. We're going to set the destination to the decay and the depth. Just a little bit. 2 is actually probably more than I normally use, but I like the way that sounds right now. So let's keep it. Now we're going to go back to LFO setup. I'm going to do reset, or no, I'm actually going to keep reset off. I'm actually going to keep all those off. So I have done the triangle wave here, but another one that I like to use a lot is the sample and hold. And if you use a less amount of depth, maybe just like a tiny bit, like say 0.6. It's very subtle, maybe a little higher. Let's do 1. That's too much. The idea I'm trying to go for here is if you have a drummer that says, hey, I'm going to attempt to play these about the same velocity, you're still going to get variance because he's not a machine. He, not a machine. And that's what this is mimicking right now. So no matter how hard that person tries, there's still going to be a little bit of variance because they're just a flesh and blood, human. So I like to do a little bit of sample and hold, which is a random waveform, and I put it in here about 0.6, and you can hear, let me turn the volume up a little bit, just a little bit of variance. If you add a little bit of swing to that, you got a pretty good convincing, for what it is, but a very formidable human sounding drums, in my opinion. So back, I think we're good here, but I'm actually going to do like I had before, the triangle. I thought that was nice. It's more rhythmic. Oops. Click, then go down. And I'm going to put it back up to 2. And we can adjust the LFO speed. Right now, everything's happening pretty on time with the bar because it's at 48, which is sort of like, I think it's kind of like a dotted half note there, or a dotted eighth note. Let's try a random number so we get a little bit more variance. Let's try 59. Too much. Let's try and go on low. Let's go 43. Okay, and let's go back here and we'll turn this down just a little bit. 1.2. Okay. Now, what I would do here is if I wanted to kind of make a little bit more movement, a little more activity here, is I would start messing with 1, the velocity, and 2, the decay per hit here. Now, the velocity is set to 100 by the way I actually set this up. I didn't use these pads, which will register some velocity. I use just, these guys that are going to hit 100 points on the velocity every time I do it. So if I put one here, 100. Put one here, 100. It's always going to be that way. So what I might do here is I might come over and say, get the odd ones, 11. I'll just do these 3. Click, and then scroll down. Maybe give it like, let's say 77. So it's not too much of a lowering of the velocity, but a little bit. Now, I'm going to go back to the pad menu, which is function in this back button, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to mess with this a little bit. So let's do shape. Let's try something we can really hear. So how about we do decay? Okay. Fairly subtle. I'm going to go ahead and actually grab these and do double these up. So here's the trick though. I'm actually going to bring these back. No, let's just do this. I'm just going to wipe these out and do this. Okay, so what I just did, it was kind of fast, but what I did is I grabbed a lower velocity hit and I put it on 2, and I kept the full velocity hit. Well, it's not full. We can go all the way up to 127, but 100 I'm going to consider kind of like the default, if you will. And then I went ahead and copied those and pasted them multiple times. So now every other hit should be a 77, giving us a little bit of that variance. I'm actually going to bring it down a little bit more. Let's do 66. I'm going to copy all these. If I hold this one down, it'll actually paste following that same grab there, but just singular. It's really nice. Sorry, let me explain that a little bit better, just in case people are watching to learn. If you grab a bunch of trigs and copy, you copy all those trigs. But then you don't have to come over here and hold each one down to replace that. You really just have to hold the first one down, and it'll follow the pattern that you grabbed. So I grabbed these 4 here, and then I copied them, and then I came here and I pasted them, and it pasted the 2 to the 10, the 4 to the 12, the 6 to the 14, and so on. It's a nice little trick. If you did hold all those down, I think it would actually paste not the way you want it, because it would paste basically each one of these starting from this. It's confusing. Just think that no matter what you copy, hold down one trig, but you have to imagine that one trig is copying from the first trig that you have over here, and it's following whatever pattern you grab. So if I grabbed 2, 4, 5, and 7 like that, and I pasted here, it would paste 10, 12, 13, and 15, but I would only be holding that one when I hit paste. So, all right. All right, we're getting somewhere. Okay, so we're kind of doing the easy stuff right now. Something else I like to do, and I go over this at length in my 6 tips, is I also like to think about what a real drummer is actually capable of doing. Now, I'm not saying a real drummer can't do this. I'm sure very talented and capable drummers can, but your average drum beat, your average drummer, if you will, is going to, well, we only have 2 arms, and when you're playing, for example, a driving hi-hat, you're going to be playing on those hi-hats, and you're going to come over and you're going to hit that snare. And when you hit that snare, there's nothing hitting the hi-hat, so your hi-hat's actually taking a super quick break. So if you do that, the way I think about it is, okay, so if I know that, then I'm going to go 5 and 13 are already occupied by one of my hands. My other hand is moving to the hi-hat, but it's not going to play it at the same time. So I come back to the track where the hi-hats are on, and I drop those hits. Now let's listen. Versus. Now it's subtle. It's not like it's jumping out big time, but to me, there's space. And I remember I went to this seminar, and it was these 3 awesome jazz musicians. I don't remember their name. They were students, so they weren't like, well known. But it was a seminar about Thelonious Monk, and the big thing that I took away, what they really hammered on, was the concept of using space. Don't just slam everything always on the same, everything happen at the same time. Let each part, whether it be a piano, a drum sound, whatever, it can be all sorts of different things, but let them have their own space. So maybe at certain points, everything backs off and just that one single thing happens. Or maybe at that one time, just the kick and the bass happens. So everything gets a little bit of space to breathe. And your ears, you might not even notice it, but subtly your ears will pick up on this just like wondrous sound, because you will hear everything much cleaner and individual, and everything sounds like it's really contributing to the overall song instead of having everything slamming at the same time, creating muddiness and sometimes confusion. Don't get me wrong, there's places for that. You're not going to find that kind of space in like a heavy metal song or something, but when it comes to like jazz or electronic music or whatever, anything really, maybe even heavy metal, using space just gives everything a space to breathe and really get its own little moment to shine. So to me, it kind of really gives room for that snare to kick. Boom! Or I should say snap, because the kick is kicking. All right, so we got something basic going on. So here's where it starts to get a little trickier. Now I will say, I don't create crazy sounding basses on the Model Cycles. I tend to stick to a relatively simple, slightly kind of squarish sounding kick bass. So that's usually what I do. So today I'm going to try not to do that, but we may end up there anyways, because that's what I really am good at. But let's find the track or the machine we're using. I'm skipping the perk machine, the percussion, mainly because this is something I should talk about real quick too. When I approach this, any track-based, sequencer-based synth, I like to kind of have a template in my mind just so things are at least somewhat in a way that I can remember, because when I first started, I would just start, okay, I want to make this sound, then I'll make that sound, then I'll make this sound, and everything was everywhere. So whenever I went to go play a new song or perform it, I would have to be like, where the heck's the kick? Oh yeah, kick's on track 5. Where's the bass? Track 1. Okay. And it just got too much. So in my head, I start off with a template, and it's usually different across all the other machines, depending, but almost always it's going to start with the drums in the beginning. It's going to do the bass next, and drums includes percussion, so anything in there, any sort of percussion or drum instrument. The piano is technically a percussion instrument, but I'm not thinking of it that way. So that's where I stick those guys, usually between at least 2 tracks, because I like to have that going on, even with the sound lock merging, but almost always 3 tracks. And then the 4th track I will use for a bass. Those are kind of my fundamentals. My first 4 sounds are going to be 3 drums, 1 bass. And then I have my lead sound, or my, voicing, kind of mimicking maybe like a voice actually, or like, it's going to be a lead because it's not going to be chords unless I use the chord machine, but I always save that one for track 6. So yeah, if you looked at it overall, you'd be basically drum set, your bass player, maybe a violin or a guitar player, but only playing one note at a time, and then your chord machine, your keyboards or what have you, pad machine. That's kind of how I roll. Now I will say, once I started merging things, getting things mixed around, it can get pretty messy, because I might realize like, oh, this particular pattern doesn't have a snare at all, and I want an extra chord machine, so I'm going to plop a chord machine there. So that can get me a little confusing, but for the most part, I stick to that template for the ease of my mind and memory. But certainly don't stick to it hardcore, because why do that? There's always room for experimentation. With that said, let's get a kick going. I'm sorry, a bass. So we've already got something nice, little square little stab going on right there. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the track menu. Click in here to rotate the keyboard down. So what I'm doing is basically taking this keyboard and I'm moving it down so I get to the lower register. Okay. So right there, it's not a bad snare. I keep saying snare. bass drum right there. But let's hear what we can squeeze out of it. Kind of get away from what I usually do. Okay, what I'm doing right here is some straight up FM. You can hear when I'm at the whole numbers, it's going to be a much cleaner sound. When I start adding those decimals in, or start getting some wacky FM modulation. But watch, back to the 3. It's cleaner, still got a nice little FM sound to it. I actually kind of like that. One parameter I haven't brought up yet is right here. You can see it looks sort of like an envelope, and it is. And the idea here is it creates a sustain stage. So if I hold this, it stays, versus that just decaying, which is of course controlled by the decay. The decay all the way open mimics that to some degree, but you can still hear it's faded out. If I bring that decay all the way back, we just get a snap. But if I turn that on, so that's kind of cool. And if you use those together, you can dial in a pretty good amount of sound. One thing it's missing though, of course, is an attack stage. There's a way around that. Maybe we have time to discuss it, but again, 6 tips video. I go at length, I go through that, and there is a way to use the LFO to affect the attack stage, giving you the ability to make pads or slow evolving sounds. So that is that's probably the second big tip I would say, because personally, I got to be able to make pads, because pads to me had so much atmosphere to a song. I can certainly make a song without them, but never being able to make it would drive me crazy. So I was so happy to figure out a workaround, and that one works great. Okay. You know, let's go with this so far, but let's change a little bit more. So we mess with the color, shape. Kind of just sounds like a bit of a low pass filter, maybe? Or maybe I'm getting harmonic increase here by doing that, so that's why it's adding more harmonic material. That's probably what's going on. Contour here is now giving me sort of a bit of filtering. Yeah, definitely filtering, but also like a compressed kind of like punch, almost like, oh, I had the punch parameter on too. That's funny. Okay, you can hear, yeah, listen to that. Okay, let's do some sweep. Everything sounds like it's filtering on this. That's funny. You know, I think I need that punch. I like that. But we need to get... It takes so much of the bass out, though, so let me... It's tough to get away from that kind of simple sound for the bass, because, you know, it's a fundamental part of the song. It needs to have some good low end. Like I mentioned, for the songs I'm generally writing, it's mimicking like kind of like a rock or R&B kind of band, I guess, if you will. So, you know, the bass is going to have a fairly mild tone. That's, of course, not a mild tone. Well, let's try it. Here. Okay. I think we can make that. It's definitely missing some of that beef that I'm, you know, normally going to find in a good bass sound, but I think we can make it work. All right, let's move on. Now I'm going to create a lead sound, and I'm actually going to use that tone machine again, because the tone machine is the closest thing you get to a traditional synth kind of voice. It's still FM, but it's fairly easy to control and get something that sounds nice. So let's get that going. Let's see what our sound just sounds like. So way too much, just definitely, for me, definitely got to have this sustain on. Unless you're just doing like an arpeggiation type of thing, but I want some decay on there. Okay, so let's have some fun. I find it a little bit easier when it comes to making the lead sounds, a little bit more forgiving, if you will, because obviously you don't need all that bass in there. You really don't want too much bass for most lead sounds. You also can be a little bit more wild with the frequency and the frequency modulation, because at higher pitches, those frequency modulations, even if they do sound harsh, they're not affecting the tone or the tune, if you will, of the song. Where if you have a low bass and it's kind of pushing that, real wonky, almost out of tune sound, to me, it can throw off the entire thing, because the bass, it just occupies so much space. If it's sounding like that, the fundamentals of the song sound out of tune, and that can really be stressing on my ears. But, there's a place for that too. But for me, right now, no. So let's just get this thing dialed in. I'm going to go to the track menu, and I'm actually going to bring the keyboard up. Let's just go 1 octave. Okay. All right, let's mess around with the color. This is just like before. It's the frequency. It's basically like, I'm not going to talk too much about FM synthesis right now. It is a huge, amazing field of music, sound design study, because you can create a ton of different sounds, and FM is extraordinarily capable, and it can do just about anything, really. But man, do you have to understand it if you want to be specific. If you say to your head, I want to make a horn sound, well, you got to know how to do that, because messing around and just doing stuff randomly with the buttons, you'd be very lucky to get there. Most of what you're going to make with FM, especially if you're coming completely blind, is going to be horrible sounding, grating noise sounds, which is awesome. But if you're trying to make a violin, you're going to be hating that, because that's all you're going to hear is, like that. Ooh. But now you can get in between there like a 3.5. Get those two tones. It almost sounds like the fifth, like the dial tone from old phones. Yes, I'm an old man. Woo, there's a nice bass sound. Maybe I should go back and use that. I like doing this too for these sounds, where you can see I'm at 2.970. So 3, clean, not so clean, a little bit out of tune. But to me, it doesn't sound that bad. Let's get something for the kick. For the bass. Ah! You know what? No, let's go back to that. Let's try something here. I'm not trying to digress too much or move away here, but I'm gonna... take it where it takes us, man. Go where it takes us. Okay. Here's something real quick that I really recommend with this guy, is being comfortable with the temporary save. So right now I'm happy with this for the most part, but I want to start tweaking and doing some wild stuff. But honestly, you can very easily get to a place where you're like, crap, I screwed up the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and temporarily save, pattern save to temp area, by holding function and hitting this little wrench button. Temp save. It's getting worn off now because it's just kind of printed on there, but it says temp save is the secondary function. So now if I go just mess everything up, well, not the volume. Oh, well, okay. I don't like this anymore. What happened? Oh no, everything sounds horrible. Function reload pattern. Right back to it. And that, obviously, if you're getting into that song, start adding some performance techniques. Right back. Love that. Okay. That's very fun. So, all right, let's tweak this bass a little bit so I can get something I'm a little more happy with. Okay, we're there. There we go. Wanted to calm that down a little bit. Okay. Let's come back to this guy. Let's go ahead and do an extra page. So what I did there is instead of just doing 16, I went ahead and doubled the amount of steps, so now we're doing 32, which is 2 pages. So if I put that there, I go to the next page, you can see this is now 17 to 32, this is 1 through 16. So this way we can build something a little bit more. All right, let's see where we're at. Okay. Quantize that just because that sounds a little sloppy. Okay, I'm not happy with that sound. I just did this so we had something to work with. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the decay down a little bit. Let's go through sweeping. Let's go extreme just to hear what it really does. So, some bit rate reduction, some noise. It's here with nothing. Very clean sine wave FM sound. Let's get some of that harmonic action in there. Cool. Let's mess with the color next. Oh, we already did that. That's 2.97. We'll leave it there. Let's do the shape. Woo! That might be something I want to modulate with the LFO. Just to be like... That could be fun. Let's find a nice middle ground. Let's try there. A little bit of contour. Okay, I'm going to come back to the color now because I feel like it's a little bit too high. Okay. Little decay. The contour is a really nice tool on this one. And here it really opens up. Or you can go back to that nice little clean, the Miss Pac-Man sound. All right, that's not bad. All right. Let's do a little LFO action on that. We're going to go with... We're going to start with the random. For some reason that's calling to me. And we're going to go mess with the sweep. Let's just go ahead and crank it and see what we get. So what's happening right now is every single 16th note, which is every single one of these, we're getting a different reading off of that random. So this one doesn't have what's really cool about the other Elektron machines is they actually have this capacity to... Oh, hey, sorry. What's cracking, big dog? Thanks, guys. I totally missed that anybody even chatted. I'm so used to nobody doing it, so I'm going to just say thank you for joining. And glad to be playing for y'all. Yeah, so... So what I'm doing right now is basically the LFO, which is set to a multiplier of 16, means it's giving me a different value every 16th step. But what I don't really want that. What I want it to do is to slow it down. And what I was actually going to say was I'm trying to mimic a really sweet feature that's on the other Elektron boxes. I don't think we're going to see it on this guy ever because I think they're done with this. But it is the ability to set how the LFO is triggered. So you do have the ability to reset this, meaning that every new step, every new trig that is lit up that actually has some information will re-trig and restart the LFO. And we're going to engage that in a second. But whenever it does that, it's going to just continue at whatever's happened with the LFO is going to happen. So what that means is if you have this random right now, what it's telling me is it's giving me random information. It's going like, between 0 and 128. That's our standard MIDI range. It's going somewhere between there, depending on the depth, which I have set very high. So it's getting most of those numbers. And it's giving us a value in between roughly 1 to 128. And it's giving us that value change I set it to 8. So every 8th note, we're getting a new amount of information. So it could be 72, it could be 5, it could be 124, it could be 3. It's random, which is really great. But say if I had this up to 32, that means even if I have a trig here, I'm going to get 2 values by the time that one trig occurs. And that's because right now I have it set to 16th notes. So every 16th note represents a trig, right? But if I have this LFO performing at twice the speed at 32 or a 32nd note, I will get 2 values for every one of these. Now that can be very cool, and that's what's happening right now. That's not that bad. But what I want right now is I want every individual hit to have a sustained value that won't change until the next hit comes. But I also want it to be random. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I extend the multiplier to a higher number. Right now I'm kind of using 8th notes because I'm skipping some. So it's not, if there was one for every, if there was a trig lit up across this thing, then it would be telling me, okay, I'm doing 16th notes. But since I have some spaces here, I'm more essentially using 8th notes. So if I set this to 8, in fact, I'm going to go to 4 just to be extra sure. Then when this trigs and sends a parameter value to this trig here, it's going to set it and it's going to keep that until it reaches the next note. This is a backdoor way of doing it. It's not designed this way, but this works. But the other thing I have to do is I have to go over here, hold function, go into the LFO setup, and I got to make sure I hit reset. This basically takes it from a free running LFO, which means you just start playing and the LFO is like, well, I'm going to, and I'm going to do whatever I want, and I'll send you the parameters when I get there. Reset says every single time that this trig appears, a trig on the sequencer, you're going to start at that very same value, which, whatever that's going to be. Now, I shouldn't say that because we're using a sample and hold, so the value is always going to be different. But say we're using a triangle or a square wave, it's always going to start at the same value. Now, with that said, with the sample and hold, what I'm trying to achieve here is that it's going to give me a parameter value, but it's not going to change that until the next hit. So this first hit will maintain whatever parameter value it's set to. So since I have the LFO going to the sweep, so it would be like if I turned the sweep knob abruptly, but I stopped and let that same setting stay until I got to the next one and I adjusted it, then I adjusted it, then I adjusted it. So that's what we're mimicking. God, I hope that made sense because I feel like I rambled a lot there, but let's hear what we get. So you're here, we're getting variation, but per note, it's staying, whatever that variation is on that note, it's staying until the next note. Let's increase the sweep a little bit. A little more shape. Okay, this is dry as a bone. I haven't put any delay and reverb on here yet, and I think we've got enough going on here that I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to add a little bit of, let's go ahead and zero these all out. Add a little bit of delay. Oh, delay is so lovely. What a fantastic effect. It makes everything sound good, as does reverb, so I'm going to add a little bit of that. Your reverb and delay on this, to me, they sound fantastic, actually, especially for how small and, yeah, I've already discussed my overall opinions of the design and everything, which is great, but it's like, it's a cheaper box. But you get, to me, a fantastic sounding delay and reverb. You just don't get a whole lot of parameters to affect. You basically just get the ability to send it to the reverb and the delay, and then you get, for the delay, you get time and feedback. Pretty standard. That's good. And then for reverb, you get size and tone. That's it. I did find what I think to be a good reverb tone setting, which is generally, oops, I'm holding the wrong one, which is 20. It could be just me, I don't know. To me, it reduces the amount of low frequency information that's going into the reverb. So what I will do on most synthesizers, if I have the capacity to do it, or especially when I'm mixing, is I usually basically cut off. I use a high pass filter to cut off the low frequencies. I know that sounds weird, but if you think of a high pass filter, starts low and starts sweeping up. And then the higher you go in the high pass filter, the less lower frequencies you get. It's basically cutting everything high pass, meaning it's allowing high frequencies to pass while cutting out the low. So usually what I'll do is I'll take probably all the way up to, I would say, minimum 150, 200 hertz, just to get rid of that low end information, because if you have a lot of low end energy coming into a reverb, you're just flaring that mud up. It is rough, and it can sound cool. I'm sure there's places you might do that. Like if you want a big old cinematic, like, smash into something, you're going to want that low. But if you got a song and a bunch of stuff's going on, and all of a sudden this low wave comes in and just takes over your whole low end, it sounds like somebody poured syrup in your ears. So I avoid that. I find that holding function and turning the reverb knob, that 20 seems to be that magic number for me. I do adjust a little bit here and there, of course, depending on the song. But I tend to try and start at that because I find it reduces just enough of that low end frequency that it takes away some of the mud. So I definitely want to bring up the reverb size. I'm going to go probably about 70. Let's hear what this is at 70. Let's get the reverb up. That's a very beautiful reverb. I think it's very, very, very nice. And you can get, we're only at a 66 cent. Oh, I do have it at infinite, so there you go. Let's bring that down. I honestly find myself in this higher territory of size. And it's just, for whatever reason, I find that I need a decent amount of this reverb, because there's obviously reverb send, but you don't get a whole lot of control over the way it mixes back in. So I feel like I need to kind of crank it to really get enough reverb to make me happy. So I'm going to actually just put it at 100 right now. Reverb send is at, we're going to go back down to about 55. Let's see what we got. Cool. So that's pretty great. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start spacing some of this stuff out. So I am not a monophonic mixer type of guy. I actually have a setup that I'm going to try and just kind of get myself to practice at, because I like space in music, but I also like to challenge myself. So I'm going to try and do some more mono mixing. But for the most part, if I have the opportunity to, I am going to use the pan as much as possible. And that even includes the drums. So I'm going to actually pan the snare. Let's bring all this stuff back in. I'm going to pan the snare just slightly, like so small, maybe even just one click to the left. It may not even be that noticeable, but honestly, it does make a difference for me. If you look at a drummer on stage, or if you're in a studio setting, usually your kick is going to be dead center. And I don't necessarily mean on the stage. I mean really in the sound of the song. It's going to be right in the center. Low energy stuff is going to, let's just say low energy. Low frequency stuff is going to be dead center, because if you put it off to the sides, there's so much energy down there that it throws off the balance of the mix instantly. I'm sure there's exceptions to that. Whenever I say anything like that, I always want you to know there's an exception, because there's no law. I think that's ridiculous. So, but it's a good rule of thumb to keep your low frequency material in the center. And there's even cool mix tricks that you can use that actually do an EQ. They take anything, doesn't have to be the kick and the bass only, but anything that's bringing in low, and you can basically cut off all the frequencies at a certain range and put those all in the dead center. So yes, I'm going to put my kick drum and my bass are always going to be smack dab center. The snare is going to be pretty darn close to center, but I like to shift it just a little out of the way just to create a little space. And that's what we did right there. Let's hear it. I mean, it's almost imperceptible. Maybe it is imperceptible. Hi-hats, I always bring those over to the right or the left. I always get those out of the way. But the one catch is, to preserve a balanced mix, you have to think, not always, but most of the time, you're going to want something on the opposite end of those hi-hats to kind of balance out the, the overall mix, to make it not sound like everything's jamming on the right and you got this empty space on the left. So I'm going to bring that goofy sounding arpeggiation thing over to kind of counterbalance it. I'm going to bring that a little wider. Okay, we're far from done, but if you listen to me, I can hear every single instrument and I can hear what it's doing. It all has a reasonable amount of space. We don't get a lot of EQ action. In fact, we get none because we don't really have a dedicated filter, which can make this difficult. But if if you're willing to really try, you can find some ways to kind of balance the mix out and give enough space for each instrument to have its own kind of, voice. All right. It's not a great song by any means, but I'm not going for a great song. I'm going for just explaining how to do this. So, on to the chord machine. Now, this is probably the best feature in terms of a machine on this guy, because the chord machine is very versatile. You can bring the shape all the way down, which is essentially, I shouldn't call it the shape, it's really just your different chord patterns. You can go all the way down to having unison, which I showed earlier. Unison 2, 3, and 4. So you can get some good basses out of that, some good leads if you need. But mostly I end up using kind of standard shapes. Got your major, minor, and suspendeds 2, 4. See right there, all of a sudden. So I'm going to do that right now. Let's use that. I like how that sounded already. So let's just go ahead and get that guy there. Let's go to 9. Make sure we have 2 pages. Yep. So go 9. I'm going to go change this shape to suspended 4. And then do this one here. Major. Ooh, it's going to sound so bad because it's not going to be in tune, but here. Technically, we are still using a C. That is a C major. I'm sorry, a C suspended 2, a C suspended 4 to a C major. So that's going to be the problem because this is in minor. But let's go ahead and take this out of the equation. I think my bass line's in minor too, but let's just listen. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. Let's go ahead and rewrite the bass line. I'm going to rewrite the, whatever that was, arpeggiation. There it is. Quantize that. Okay. Wow, we've already changed that dramatically. Now it's sort of like a happy kind of song. Let's see here. Cool, let's do something like that. Okay, quantize, already done. Okay, got a lot of cleanup to do. I find that a lot with this guy. Is like, honestly, it's a great idea machine, but once you get an idea somewhat solidified, I highly recommend immediately doing some mixing, because once you start spreading that pattern across, like if you copy it and you're like, all right, in this pattern, I'm going to change up this part, and then the next pattern, I'm going to change up this part, you would have to go back and do one of two things: mix each pattern back individually, or save those as presets and apply them over. So it's kind of a pain. So what I would give as another tip on this guy that I probably should have mentioned in the video that I put up there before is kind of nail down your sounds in the first pattern, maybe over a couple patterns, but the point being, get your idea going. But once your idea starts and gets to maybe a little bit of footing to that idea, try to do some mixing, to the limited best you can with the modal cycles, because you really don't want to have to do all that stuff later. And I know that from experience. The one album that I put out, God, it was a couple years ago, but it was the Thumbprints Modal Cycles. I wrote all that stuff like 3 years or 2 years before I released that album. And I spent most of the time basically mixing, because I really shot myself in the foot. I did almost all the writing on headphones, and again, I was traveling. And so when I finally got back and put it into my mains in my studio, I was like, oh my God, this sounds horrible. Like the kick drum was just like booming, and the other things were just weak or too strong, or it was all over the place. And what really killed me is I would mix, say, the first pattern, and I'd get it to a place I'd like, and then I'd move to the second pattern, and I'd literally have to start over again. Because what I realized I did is I would change throughout the song. I would slightly change everything so it had like a little variation to it, or maybe this on pattern 2, the bass was a little brighter or something like that. And what it ended up doing to me is meaning that I couldn't just copy paste those sounds over. I had to go back and mix, and it took forever. So do your baseline mixing first, just to get there and save so much time, because maybe all you have to do in the end is just slight tweaks to get those to sound a little bit different, but still have that cohesive like song sounds to them. So good tip. Highly recommend it. So, another thing that's a bummer, what I would do right now, I'd love to do on arpeggiators, is I would take and I would turn the LFO, or I'm sorry, what I would do is I would basically use an LFO and I would pan the sound so that basically was kind of like popping all over the place. That's something I like to do with arpeggiation, especially with something that's relatively simple. This is not like an overly complex song we're doing here. And it kind of gives a little bit of space and a little kind of variety, and kind of fills up the palette, or the panorama. But with this machine, you cannot P-lock the pan. Oh, what a... Ugh! Every other one that I've ever used, Elektron machine, every other one, you can do that. You cannot do it on here. But there are workarounds. Again, I put this up in my tips video. I go through it very much at length. So if you want to learn how to do that, I recommend it there. But I'm going to go through it real quick. I'm going to take away this sweep parameter, because unfortunately we only get one LFO. And to do this trick, you need to use the LFO. Now, I did have a comment where somebody said using velocity sensitivity to do this, the velocity modulation. I haven't had a chance to test that out. The way he explained it, it didn't make sense in my head, so I'm going to have to mess with it. I don't want to just try and do it right now, because I'll probably get lost in the weeds on it. But apparently, according to that person, there's another way. So I need to investigate, because what I loathe to do is give up my LFO, because I want that for sound design. But at this point, I believe what we get out of the pan here is going to be worth more than what I would get out of sound design. So let's hear what just happened. I'll probably bring that down a little bit, because I have it very much high in how much it's panning. I'm going to go down to maybe like high 30. Okay. There we go. Bring the volume down a little bit. Okay, back to the chord machine. That is the standard waveform. So here's what's also very cool about the chord machine. You get a bunch of, I guess you'd call them PCMs. Think of it like, what is that? Oh God, why am I blanking on that? It's a type of wave synthesis. Anybody know? What am I trying to say? It's the way the waves state. It's like the ability to scan across a multi waveform that contains different waveforms. Oh, I can't think of what it's called. But essentially, that's what that's kind of what you can do here, because each one of these, 0 to 128, represents a different sound. So listen. Man, what is that called? Can anybody help me out with that? It's like wave. You know what? Here, it's on this guy. What's it called? Oh no, I don't see it on here. Okay. Well, yeah. They just call it shape on here, but I forget what it's called. Point being is that you can morph between these waves. By using an LFO, for example. But you can hear each one of them sounds pretty different. But when they're right next to each other, if you just go slight little shift in tone, but if I go up from like 90 to 95, quite different. So you gotta find one you're generally happy with. That's not too bad. Let's put this off to the side so we can hear it a little bit better. Let's go the other way since we have our hi-hats kind of setting the volume on the right. We might adjust the inversion here. Let's go to the second inversion. What is that? Oh, third. Can we go fourth on this thing? That'd be crazy. Wow. That doesn't sound too bad. A little reverb on it. Okay. Now let's do a little LFO. So here's what I was talking about. So if we apply the LFO to the sweep, gotta love those little LEDs. That's such a cool feature. I wish they all did that. Alright. 16's probably good. I think a triangle's probably good. Let's just do a little bit of depth on here. I'm actually gonna slow it down. And I'm going to adjust the LFO speed so that we're not in a, it was basically repeating in a very defined fashion. I want a number that's going to repeat in a more polyrhythmic fashion, just to give it more of a variance. All right. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. Looks like we're low on the volume. Wavetable! Jeez, thank you, dude. Thank you, Evan. Yes, that's exactly what I was trying to think of, but I could not think of it in my brain. Thank you very much. Okay. So you can hear it's sort of like a wavetable synthesis going on with that chord machine, because we're basically kind of blending in between those different, I believe they're PCM waveforms. I mean, I guess, I'm not really sure what they would call those, but they're clearly something, because there's a variance between each step, but only slightly, and as you go more, you get more, so that way if you have an LFO kind of pushing you through those, you get this nice movement, and yeah, it mimics, or may very well just be, a wavetable modulation. Cool, that's kind of like an upbeat, little happy kind of thing. Yeah, thanks again, man. That helps. My brain was going to struggle with that. Okay, so right now we have 6 tracks, and every one of those is playing something. So right now you're like, okay, well, we're done. We got that pattern. There's no more room, right? We're done. No, we are not done, because we're going to do something real quick that I love. Once I learned this, I swear it felt like I had 2 modal cycles in one, and it really changes the game. So if you've been with me this whole time, you'll remember earlier I was showing how I basically removed the steps that the snare was playing. I removed those from the hi-hat. This gives that space that you're going to find a lot with a natural drummer. He's hitting on those hi-hats and he's going to come over and hit the snare. And when he does that, you can see boom, 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 boom. So my hand, this hand is up, this hand's on the snare, so no hi-hat is being played. So we just created space for that snare. That happens naturally from a drummer, but on a drum machine you have to do it, because if you just pile on those 16th notes, you're going to basically have a hat and a snare playing. Now again, I just want to say most drummers won't do this because it's not really natural. I'm sure there's a drummer out there who can, you know, like I've seen some amazing drummers that do stuff that I didn't know human bodies could do. So, you know, the drummer from Def Leppard only has one arm and he can play the drums. So a 2-armed one should be even able to do more. So, what I'm going to do now, because my snare is relatively simple, I'm not doing any sort of like ghost notes or anything. It's just a straight on the floor 2 and 4 snare hit. I'm going to take this snare. I'm going to copy it as a preset. To do that, I'm going to go to the preset menu by holding function. I got to be on the track. So here's my snare. Play there. There's my snare. I'm going to go to the preset menu by holding function and hitting the machine button. You can kind of see preset menu underneath there as a secondary. I'm going to scroll over to YT, which should be in here. Yep. That's my YouTube folder. Go to an empty slot. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, you just get into that folder. You can create a folder. Again, tips video, watch that. I'm not going to go over that now. But once you're in a folder, if you hit function, it brings up this little menu and you can click on save presets. Now you can name it. We're going to call this SN, let's see. You know, it's so funny, like this is by far I don't want to say lesser, but I mean, this one was a far cheaper, far less built up machine than say the Digis or most other of the boxes. But unlike almost all of them except for the Octatrack, you can do lowercase letters on here, which I think is funny. You only get uppercase on the other boxes, which is just a weird limitation. But you know, Elektron is very well known for separating certain features across the boxes, so one box doesn't do everything. And you know, as a struggling musician, that can be frustrating because you want all those fun tricks and you want to not have to spend 10 grand to get them all. But I can't disagree with the concept because it makes every machine its own special thing. And that's pretty great, you know, I have to admit. Snare, I don't know, let's call it happy. It's just kind of a happy song, so let's just call it, you know, let's just call it Gilmore. That way it would be a little funnier. So, as in Happy Gilmore. Maybe I'll, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but maybe I'll just make a quick little album someday that's just related to Happy Gilmore. I'd like to call one Chubbs. All right. Gilmore, Snare Gilmore. Okay. Click this again to bring up the save menu. One more time to save it. And we're good. So we can actually come here and we can go ahead and boop, erase that. Why didn't it erase? Maybe because I'm still in here? Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And then we're also going to erase the sound. So now it should just be that's the default snare sound. And you're like, why'd you do that? Why did you just ruin your sound? Well, because if I go over to this guy, and I come here, I have these 2 empty, well, technically 4 because I have 2 pages. I have these empty trigs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this one here. I'm going to engage it first, so there's a trig on there. Now I'm going to hold it. Now I'm going to come back up here, hit this button, which will take me back to the preset menu just by itself. Go to that YT folder where I saved my Gilmore snare. Where did it go? Snare, there it is. This is important. If you were to let go of this trig, this menu would still say exactly where it is. And if you push that button, it'll wipe out all this. It'll basically change the fundamental patch on this track. So instead of having just the snare here and eventually here, every one of these trigs is going to be snare. So you don't want to do that. What you want to do is continue to hold it so it says, hey, we're only doing this for this one trig. Then you push this, you'll see this lights up. That tells you that you are now using a sound lock. And if you're not familiar with what a sound lock is, it's essentially the ability to create a preset. Any machine, any setting of parameters, whatever, completely different. This could be a chord machine just for one step on this track. You could do it for all of them, but the point is that you could effectively save 64 presets, each comprised of a different machine, you know, within reason. There's 6 machines, so, you know, 10 different machine or 10 different variations, if you will, since you have 64. So each one of those could have an entirely different sound. Some of them will share the machine, but basically you could have each one of those machines that you have to use over and over, different parameters. So just think, you could have 64 different sounds across one track, and every single trig plays an entirely different sound. So, boom. I mean, to me, when that hit home, I was like, holy crap. Like, that is... It took what I considered to be the limitations of this thing, and it blew the door wide open, because it said to me, like, there are... I mean, yeah, that is a limitation eventually, but to think I would create 64 sounds on one track, like, it would take me a day to just make those sounds. I'm not going to do that, is the point. But I am going to use a couple just so I can get some more variation. And if I felt really inclined one day, maybe I'll use 30. Maybe I'll use 50. Ridiculous amounts. Right now, I'm just going to use 1. So if I back this out, I can also tell by looking at these, sorry, not by looking at these, by holding it down. If I hold this one down, that I already know this has a lock. If I hold this one down, you can see it doesn't light up. So only the ones that I hold down that have that are locked. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it in these open slots. So you can see, just to be 100% sure, I'm going to mute that snare. And now let's listen. There it is. The snare is alive. It is here. It is with us. It is in the room. It's a little loud, so I can adjust that. And this is also a really cool feature. If you adjust the volume, that will only affect the bass sound, meaning the hi-hats on this track. So watch. Don't hear the hi-hats anymore, do you? Now you hear them. Maybe I'll make them a little louder, kind of equal to the snare. I kind of find a nice balance. Overall, they're too loud together, but the snare and the hi-hat are about the same. Maybe it'll go a little less on the hi-hats. And now that I've set that, I can come over and I can affect the overall track volume and bring them both down together. So that, to me, right there is the icing on top of the cake. Is not only can you create the sound locks and create different parameters, but you get a reasonable amount of control post creating and implementing those sound locks. Meaning you can get this all together, but you can still edit things about it. You can be like, okay, well, maybe I don't like how much of this is on there, or how much of that is on there. And of course, you could do that by individually locking each one of these to a different volume, but that's a pain in the butt. This gives you a quick access to it. But on top of that, though, you can still use parameter locks just like you would. So say if this snare here, you want it nice and normal, and then this snare here, you want to crank the delay. Let's do that. Kind of heard it in the end there. I'm going to do something a little more drastic. Not drastic enough. There we go. So you can get really, really wild with this thing. I'm going to erase that for now because I'm going to keep it simple. So we've got effectively 6 tracks playing, but technically we have 1 track completely unused. Now, if you felt so inclined, you do have to make some sacrifices here. If I wanted to merge the hi-hat and the snare onto the kick drum, well, then I got to remember that I also need to make space for the kick drum, which is happening every downbeat of each step, or I'm sorry, each each one, you know, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3. So basically every whole note here is getting, every quarter note here is getting a kick. So if you were to try to merge these together, you're going to have to eliminate these guys, which of course would be the kick. It just wouldn't work, is the point I'm saying. So there are some limitations. There are definitely ways to put what you would consider a full drum sound on the one track, because, you know, if you're playing some sort of like, you know, kind of lo-fi, laid back, kind of like hip hop thing, maybe you can really fill everything out, but let each drum hit have its own space. So maybe like kick, hi-hat, snare, kick, hi-hat, snare. You can put that all on one track because you have it spaced out enough. For this one, minimum is 2. But like I said, we now have our second track wide open. So what would I do? I mean, at this point, I feel like I got a full-on sound coming here. I could create a lead, so maybe we should try that. Go to a tone here again. Oops. I didn't make a lead. I guess I did something else without even thinking about it. It's alright, it works. Just adding another layer. Let's play with this guy a little bit. Let's do a little shape. Okay, so I could do some LFO to do some variation and modulation here, but there's one last thing that I haven't talked about. If you are familiar with the Elektron sequencer, you know how fantastic this is. I have mentioned it throughout the video so far, but that is parameter locks. Parameter locks, though, makes it seem like I have to go and lock each individual parameter to do what I want. That is definitely something you can do. But instead, you can also treat it as a modulation source, meaning I'm going to go ahead and just do, I think, what is it? They call it motion recording on the Korgs. I'm going to do motion recording. So basically, I'm going to let the sequencer go. I'm going to turn it into a recording mode, and then I'm just going to tweak the knobs. Now, I will say the one thing about this, did I move that a little bit? I did. Is what you hear me do before it plays back after it's recorded is going to be different, because I can get a lot more fluid playing and fluid control versus what this sequencer can capture. They call it PPQN or something like that. And basically it's how many individual slots you have between each step. So your, Evan, you want to help me out on this one? What's it called? Your resolution? Resolution, yeah. Basically, if you think of digital anything, when you get down close enough, things are digitized. They're individualized. You know, your sample rate when you record something in a DAW, if you look really close to that waveform, it steps because it's not an analog waveform. It's not pure and constantly in a perfect variation. It's going to have to sample. It's going to have to snapshot. It's something at some stage. Now, you get to a point, obviously, where it's so good that you can't hear it. It sounds like a perfect, beautiful, clean wave. But again, if you look closely enough, anything digital is going to break down eventually to hard movement, you know, because it's snapshotting. It's going picture. A movie is a great example. So when you hear about frames per second, something shot in 24 frames per second looks vastly different to 100 or 60 or 120. And the idea is that it's giving you more of those snapshots and it's making it seem more analog or more fluid. So with that said, when we go to record this, I'm going to change a bunch of stuff and you're going to hear a more higher resolution variation of that or version of that because I'm playing these and I'm getting all that variation. I can move this knob and create many more snapshots that can be captured by the sequencer. So when it goes to play back, it's going to be much more digitized, if you will. So I just want to give you a heads up on that. It never turns out what I want it to sound like, but sometimes it turns out even better. most of the times I'm like, I wish I could get more resolution. Which you on some of the other sequencers, it's a little better. Like the MPC Live, I believe, has a higher resolution. So anyway, let's do it. Let's listen to it go by one more time. See what I mean? Might even over-record some of that because that's okay. That's not too bad. Probably shouldn't have messed with the color. Should have chose a different one. All right. So, I mean, honestly, we got a pretty decent basis for a song. Is it my best song ever? No, of course not. Is it a cool idea? Yeah, I think so. And honestly, if I spent a couple of days with this, I think I could probably make something decent. You know what? I'll challenge myself to use this exact palette of sounds we just created. And it probably won't be for a little bit, but I will go ahead and try and make a song out of this. I will call it Gilmore. I think that is a lovely name for a song. I do have a Model Cycles song you heard in the beginning of this. That's going to be something I put out hopefully this Friday. All I got to do is just perform and record it, so that'll be pretty simple. As much as I love the Model Cycles, I have to, I want to go through all my synths and do some fun stuff, as well as, I've got the Tone Verk, and I've only put out one song with the Tone Verk, and that thing is just dying to be used because they just fixed the update recently. I'm sorry, they fixed the MIDI jitter. And so I'm very, very excited to be using that more. I did use it on my last week's one, and I created some sounds on the Behringer 2600, and I did capture some multi-samples. I do intend to use that to then make a song, but I also want to share those multi-samples, so give me some time. I have to rebuild my website. I have to do so many different things to kind of get to a place where I can start sharing things and just be more proactive in that realm. But essentially what I want to get to is creating lots of sounds that I can save in both the Tone Verk format, but also try to do the MPC. I'd love to be able to figure out how to basically import those into each other and go back and forth depending on which I actually record with. I know it's possible. I just haven't looked into it yet. So, just, be patient with me. I'm going to get there. I really want to make this something that, people not only enjoy watching, but also maybe get some value out of. Like samples, maybe some presets, maybe some project files, that kind of stuff. It just takes time though. The reality is I'm not making any money from this, which is fine. I'm not expecting to right now, but this all comes out of extraneous time, which I don't have a lot of. I work full time, I have a family, all that kind of stuff. So this is just something I'm just super passionate about. I love music. I love synthesizers. And I finally realized I should have been doing this for like the last 10 years on YouTube. I don't know why I haven't, but I finally realized this is what I should be doing. So I'm going to be doing it. But yeah, just bear with me. I think things are going to get a lot better. I'm going to work on everything too. Like I want everything to look better. I want my streams to look better. I want my voice to sound better. I don't want to sound like Kermit the Frog, like the guy said on the last video. So bear with me. Stick around. I hope you subscribe. I hope you enjoy what I'm doing. And if you do, please come back. Come check it out. Tuesdays, every Tuesday at 8 p.m., barring, holidays, or obviously if anything happens that I need to take the time off, I very much intend to do it very regularly. I would love to even start a second stream where maybe I do something also similar but different. So hopefully that's something I want to do eventually too. So that'll come eventually. But yes, for now, I'm sticking to one stream a week, one performance video a week, and maybe some shorts that are going to come out here and there. But yeah, so I hope to see you all again. I hope you come out. I hope that you enjoyed what you're seeing. And if you do, please, let some people know. Maybe some more people will show up. My first stream, I had like nobody. My second stream, I had a couple people. and this is probably like my 15th or something, and I'm getting a little bit better. So, we're getting a little more views. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. It is 10 o'clock. I have to call it. I have to go get ready for bed. Thank you so much. And yes, I will see you hopefully next week, Tuesday. I'll be there. I hope to see you there. Gilmore. All right. I'm into that. I think that's good.